Before we move on to part 3 with Mary's life after she and Casey broke up, there were 2 incidents that we want to touch on. Back in 1995, Suge Knight, head of Death Row Records, traveled to New York for the Sources Award ceremony. Danny Boy, one of his recording artists, traveled with him. Danny Boy has said in numerous interviews that he was about 15 or 16 at the time. After the show was over, Danny hung out for a while in Suge's hotel room along with others, including a group of girls. After Danny left the gathering and went back to his own room, he got a phone call from Suge. He wanted Danny to come back to Suge's room because, according to Suge, old girl wanted to see Danny. Since there were several girls in the room when he was there before, Danny had no idea who old girl was. Once he got back to the room, nearly everyone was gone. All that were left were Suge, Misa Hilton, Diddy's first baby's mama, and Mary J. Blige. While Misa was naked but covered with a sheet, Mary was sitting on the couch. Danny knew that Misa wasn't the one asking for him. That left Mary. Danny sat down next to Mary, and the two started to talk. Reports indicate at this time Mary was in her early 20s. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Upon hearing the knock, Mary ran and jumped behind the couch. Wow. She was trying to hide, thinking that it might be KC at the door. At the time, the two of them were in a relationship. However, it wasn't him at the door. It was only room service. After the brief scare, Danny and Mary started talking again. Eventually, they went into one of the other bedrooms and had relations. This was a scene that would repeat itself over the following months, as according to Danny, Mary would fly him to New York several times so they could be together. Aside of the fact that Mary was a grown woman and Danny was a minor, there have been rumors that Mary was grooming Danny. The rumors also suggested that she was either grooming Danny for Diddy or that she learned about grooming people from Diddy. Damn. All of this, of course, is alleged. Okay? Alleged, that thing. But remember, she and Diddy have been close ever since the early 90s. In light of what Diddy is going through now, anyone who's ever been connected to him is under suspicion. In another situation, not long after the above events, Mary was in a relationship with R&B singer Case. The two met through Misa Hilton, who at the time was working with him on his album. Mary would also start working with Case and co-wrote 4 of the songs on his debut album. One of the songs was his hit Touch Me, Tease Me, for which Mary also appeared in the video. While working together, Mary and Case started messing around. For a time, they were in a relationship. According to Case, they also lived together. Meanwhile, Case went on tour and took one of Mary's cousins along to serve as his hype man. While on the road, Case started feeling himself and began acting like he was a star. He started messing around on Mary, and at times, he would bring multiple girls at a time into his hotel room. What about the cousin, you may ask? Wasn't Case scared that he might tell Mary about what Case was up to? Case's bright idea was to wait until the cousin went into his own hotel room, then bring the girls into his room. He believed that he could throw off anyone that questioned him about the girls by telling them that the girls were his friends, or that they were just people he knew. Friends, but okay. Needless to say, Both of these were amazingly stupid ideas. But when you want to do wrong, any excuse is better than none. Of course, word did get back to Mary about what was going on. And just like that, Mary and Case broke up. The 90s were hard on relationships. We often found ourselves being very reckless, petty, and immature in a way that was rationalized in our own minds. We wanted to have fun without consequences. Very little forethought was put into thinking about the outcomes of poor decisions. We had fun, but ultimately sacrificed our happiness and well-being, total well-being. We didn't think much about the effects our behaviors and choices would have on our minds and mental stability. But I digress. Now back to where we left off at the end of part 2. As the world entered the new millennium in 2000, Mary was still in a world of her own, one that was fueled by liquor, wine, weed, and rocaine. Woo! That bad Roro, that El Diablo Blanco. They clouded her mind. Mary once had a situation where she drove the wrong way on Franklin Delano Roosevelt Drive in New York. She crashed into a wall, which sent her car spinning out of control, while her passenger screamed at the top of her lungs. Reflecting back on her life, Mary said that she kept being in situations where men were jealous of her, and they always wanted something from her besides the obvious. Either money, a career, or to physically abuse her. As a result, Mary wasn't necessarily looking for a man, as she felt like her freedom would be taken from her by one. At that time, Mary was running the streets and clubbing nearly every day of the week. But even though she wasn't looking for a man, she found one anyway. In 2000, Kendu Isaacs was working on an album with Queen Latifah. For one of the songs, he suggested that they get Mary to jump on it with Latifah. At that time, Mary was on tour and her schedule was really tight. However, she carved out time on one of her tour stops to record the song. He and Mary would meet for the first time when she arrived at the studio. Mary thought that Kendu was cute. However, she didn't act on that feeling because she believed that Kendu and Latifah were a couple. Okay, yeah, all right. When the recording session was over, they all hung out together. Afterwards, Isaacs really wanted to see Mary again and felt that he needed to talk to her. All right, pay attention to this. He would eventually beg Latifah to call her for him. Behind the scenes, Latifah was encouraging Mary to give Kendu a call. Months later, Kendu was caught off guard when Mary finally did contact him. This would have a major impact on their relationship. Right out the gate, Isaacs told Mary that he needed to talk to her about some things. And that what he had to say might hurt her. What he said made Mary's ears perk up. "I don't want to be hurt no more," she immediately responded. He then explained that he didn't want to hurt her in that way. Instead, he spoke to her using metaphors. He compared what she was going through in her life to having a cut that has a scab over it. However, despite the scab, the wound was badly infected underneath. The hurt he was referring to would come when she removed the scab, which was necessary so that the wound could be treated in order to heal properly. Alright. While Isaacs would later say he didn't know where the words he said came from, they were exactly what Mary needed to hear. She would say that She understood exactly what he was talking about because she knew she was damaged. Additionally, she said that his words woke up her spirit. After that first phone call, Mary already thought that there was something different about Kendu. Later, she reflected that the call was the first conversation she ever had with a guy who cared more about her as a person and wasn't just trying to sleep with her. At the same time, Kendu's willingness to communicate with her was something she desperately needed. She was also drawn to his maturity, as well as how honest he was. On the day they were to go on their first date, Mary fell in love with Isaacs. He didn't do anything special for this to happen. In fact, all he did was sit in the living room, waiting for her to finish getting ready. Without him knowing, Mary peeked in on him as he sat. She was moved by how fatherly, interesting choice of words, fatherly, and confident he looked. At the same time, she got scared because Isaacs wasn't the kind of man that she had ever seen before. To her, his demeanor seemed to say, "I'll take care of you. I can make you feel safe." These were things that she craved. And we all do, right? Once the day began, Mary was still scared. Even though she did a lot of laughing and joking to try to cover it up, the entire time her mind was wondering, what does he really want? Sadly, she wasn't used to a man coming around her and wanting to stay. While their relationship was off to a good start, they still had some hurdles to get past. One day, shortly after their first date, Mary blurted out, "You're my husband," to Kendu. There was only one problem with that. Kendu was already married. Additionally, he had a 2-year-old daughter, as well as 2 other children. Mary was aware of all this, which is what led her to the next statement. "How is it possible that you're my husband, but you're taken?" While Isaacs was married, he was separated. While he didn't lie to her about his status, he didn't want it to get in the way of what they had going on. That was okay between Isaacs and Mary, until one day he decided to put his 2-year-old on the phone with Mary. It made Mary feel some kind of way. All of a sudden, she began thinking about that little girl, about her mother, about his other children. Mary started to think that maybe her and Kendu's relationship wasn't such a good idea after all, as it made her feel like a homewrecker. She didn't want to be responsible for anything bad happening to his family. From Kendu's perspective, he insists that his marriage was already in trouble before he and Mary really got involved. However, it took some time before he could convince Mary that she hadn't torn Kendu's family apart. Once they got past this issue, Isaacs moved in with Mary in her New Jersey home. During this time, Mary was still partying and drinking way too much. It wasn't uncommon for her to stay out until 4 in the morning. It would take a conversation that wasn't meant for her ears to get her to change. Once, while getting ready to perform at the Apollo, she overheard Kendu say to someone that if Mary came home drunk that night, he was going to leave her. After she got on stage, Mary kept thinking that not only would she go home sober that night, she'd also stop drinking. She even made a point of getting home by 10. From that point forward, Mary has worked hard to maintain her sobriety. We're going to take a little time out from this story to ask you to be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, hit the notification bell, and repeat with this and all of our videos. Now back to the story. After they'd been together for a while, Mary and Kendu began reading the Bible together. As they read, they began to be convicted on how they were living and felt guilty about living together and having sex without being married. Men don't really do well with no sex, Mary would later say matter-of-factly. However, she told Isaacs that if he loved her, he'd have to show her how much he loved her by moving out. Kendu did as she asked, and for over a year, the couple abstained. Then on December 7th, 2003, they got married in a small intimate ceremony at Mary's home. No celebrities attended, as Mary wanted to limit the hoopla surrounding her big day. Instead, guests were limited to friends and family of the bride and groom. Exactly how low-key was the wedding? Mary's mother and sister did all the cooking, as the guests dined on oxtails, barbecue chicken, crabs, red rice, salad, and cake. Okay then, Mary. After Kendu and Mary became husband and wife, she worked hard to be a good stepmother to his children. Brianna would later gain a measure of fame after appearing on TV. As for Kendu, Mary felt that he was her knight in shining armor. In an effort to ensure that they had a marriage that would last, they had a rule they each agreed to abide by. While they each could have their own friends, neither of them were allowed to have friends of the opposite sex. When Mary spoke on the subject, she said this: "There's none of that. Oh, that's my female friend," or "Oh, that's my guy friend." No, not in a marriage. I've never seen that work. Yep, that's reasonable. I agree with Mary. Hang out with your in-laws or something. You don't need the drama of opposite sex friends in your relationship. The only third party in your relationship should be Jesus. But I digress. Well, that concludes the third part of our series on the Queen of Hip Hop Soul. Stay tuned for our upcoming fourth and final part. Stay blessed and take care.